Welcome back to Fast Market. I'm Tom White, filling in for Alex Coffey. Let's get a quick rundown of markets where we stand about 2 hours into the trading day. We've got the S&P 500 basically flat here, basically flat. Dow Jones Industrial Average down 0.1%. NASDAQ still leading the way, 0.4% higher, and the Russell 2000 now down 1.64% on the session, as those small caps get sold off here a little bit after that worse than expected jobless claims number. But now it's time to hit social media, and for that we're going to bring in TD Ameritrade Network contributor Miss Jenny Horn to join us. We're talking Snap today, Jenny. I know you're an avid Snapchat user. Let's hear it.
So I actually think I'm too old to be a Snapchat user because their target demographic is these Gen Zs, which are apparently aged 13 to 24, which I am no longer, and you definitely are not a Gen Z. So Snap is interesting because they have earnings coming up alongside Twitter, actually, which they'll report sort of together. Now they're up about 26% year to date, but they've fallen pretty significantly off of their February highs, and actually over the last month down about 8%. They've really seen outside of the last month this continued momentum as we saw such a boom in last year's online traffic, with social media companies sort of benefiting altogether. But what everyone is sort of wondering is, can this momentum continue even as things reopen and people spend less time, say, playing video games on social media and also on some of these different streaming devices? So this whole area as a whole has a lot of question right now as things sort of change in this new normal, is what we're calling it. But what is interesting is really its daily active users. This is one of its key metrics, and it actually increased these by over 51 million on a year-over-year basis last quarter. And analysts are estimating for this current quarter them to grow about 22%. Now, another thing is their global average revenue per user is expected to jump about 53% year-over-year. Now, this is a pretty key metric because it could signal how well it's actually monetizing its already existing users. Now, what Snap doesn't do so well is generate a consistent profit, but they do consistently beat earnings. They beat in the last 6 consecutive reports. And last quarter, their revenue rose a very healthy 66%, and it's the highest pace of growth they've seen in nearly 13 quarters. Now, they also said back in February they're in a position to grow by more than 50% annually for the years to come. So they are actually predicting an extremely healthy level of growth. With this quarter, they're estimating revenue to be about $838 million, which would be up about 84% year over year. So if they can make that, that will be astronomical for them, of course. And that brings me to our first tweeter today, which actually touches on this, which says, Snap will be looking for its 4th straight quarter of accelerating year-over-year revenue growth when the company reports earnings after hours Thursday. 84% year-over-year revenue growth would be the highest quarterly growth rate Snap has announced since its IPO. So clearly big expectations there, and I actually think some of the stock selling over the last month puts it at a better position, or else I would say that expectations may actually be too high for Snap ahead of this report. But there is some degree of headwinds, as things I mentioned are reopening, and also, now we have the rising COVID cases with this Delta variant, which sort of offers a mixed bag. And I thought our next tweeter touched on an important point, which says, new COVID cases are rising in all 50 states. The thing is, fintech banks and social media have proven to be safe havens regardless. SoFi Technologies, Square, Facebook, Snap, and Apple, because they killed it during the whole pandemic. Also, Amazon and Walmart. So I think this is interesting because, Landon, I would have typically never said that social media stocks were a safe haven, although in the past year, they've sort of proven to be just that. So I'm curious how Snap is looking as things reopen. We've talked to Netflix, we've talked to some of these other areas where we're seeing sort of, a fall off in users just because I believe people are leaving their homes for one. So I'm curious if you're seeing that trend in Snapchat.
Sure. Yeah. I hope people are leaving their home and getting out there. But,
me too.
just like we talked about in Netflix, we measure English speaking only. So that's a huge caveat to know about LikeFolio data. And so we're looking at when we talk about purchase intent, people joining Snapchat, adding that, downloading it, becoming a user, creating an account, all of that. And so that's sort of the growth metric that we're talking about. It's not how much they're using it. It's how many new people are using it. And that's what we call purchase intent. And, from our data, it looks pretty bleak as far as the U.S. goes. I think they've got a pretty good saturation level going, just like we talked about with Netflix. And, you talked about the average dollars per user, which is very significant. And the problem is there that the biggest growth of average dollar per user is coming from North America, but that's actually the slowest portion of growth. So we're seeing it slow down quite a bit, and especially when you compare it to a rival like TikTok. Now, I know these two platforms aren't exactly the same. Obviously, they're very different. Snapchat, I think, is more about the direct one-on-one messaging, and TikTok is more about discovery. But Snapchat's doing a lot of copycatting, and they're trying to create that sort of TikTok effect. The problem is that now we're seeing that TikTok is surpassing Snapchat as the preferred platform, the preferred social app for that younger demographic. And so we're definitely a little bit concerned there for Snapchat moving forward. And when you look at happiness, which we have here, you can see people are very happy with the Instagram platforms, Pinterest, and then Snapchat is kind of fourth on the list, just a little bit above Facebook. So happiness-wise, this has always been a bit of a struggle for Snapchat. Every time they change their format, people get a little bit frustrated. You know, they launched that this Discover feature, which is more sort of long form and more branded experiences, more about getting the advertising dollars, but people really didn't jump on it. And instead, when they copied the TikTok and they launched Spotlight, they did a lot better. And so I think that, you know, Snapchat's still finding its way a little bit, but getting that dollars per user up is really the key. The problem is it's growing fastest in the US, but that's where the users are growing the slowest. So you can see here on this chart, the Snapchat Discover did not do well. People did not resonate with it, but then Spotlight, which again is sort of the TikTok copy, did really well, and they're growing there. So I still think they can do very well. It's just that TikTok has, you know, completely showed them how to run their own business, and Snapchat is now trying to catch up.
You know, Landon, this company has had a lot of drama in its history, right? I mean, they made some bad choices early in their run. The stock got down to under $5, and then this is a comeback story, right? This is a company that's turned themselves around. This is the greatest comeback since Lazarus, guys. And so for this company to get up to where it is now, and like Jenny reported, the average revenue per user is expected to grow 53%, but they're still not going to make any money, Landon. I mean, their revenues are growing, their earnings per share is going to beat, but they need to start, at some point, they need to start doing like Facebook and these other companies do and make money. They need to monetize these users. Do you see any way, or does your data show any promising result in them monetizing their users? Because they get 98% of their revenue off ad revenue. They've got to start drawing money from all these users, correct?
Yeah, and you're exactly right. Obviously, they're aware of that problem, and I think that their solution to that problem is what they call Spotlight, which is, again, that TikTok copy. So if you think about Snapchat, you're messaging your friend one-on-one. The last thing you want to see, and how intrusive can you imagine that would be if you got ads when you're messaging someone one-on-one? So they know they can't really push that too far. So they tried Discover, which is where basically companies could come in and put on long-form content, and, you know, basically it's a long advertisement with a little bit of a cool factor. That was the goal. I think it kind of missed. It's a bit of a flop. So now they're trying Spotlight, which is basically where you can go in and it's TikTok. You discover new things. It's quick hitters. It's funny, short attention span, and you can sneak some ads in between because it feels like you're digesting and discovering new content. So I think this is their answer to how do we get revenue up, because as a messaging platform, you just can't jump in between people's conversations and, you know, advertise a product.
Yeah, and Landon, if you look at, you know, Snap and, you know, their demographic, their age group, right? It's the younger kids. By the way, I'm not surprised to see them low on the happiness scale. Are moody teenagers ever happy all the time? But if you look at this, and if Spotlight's supposed to be their growth driver moving forward, what does it look like versus Reels on Instagram or TikTok?
Right. Yeah. If you can actually look at that chart that was just up, TikTok, you can see that, you know, they were doing. TikTok was behind, I guess, a couple of years ago. The pandemic hit and everyone joined TikTok. It was incredible, the spike. Now look at Snapchat's increase in usage when the pandemic hit. It's a little bitty bump up, and then it continues this trend downward. And so TikTok not only passed them, but they surged right by them. I think that it was sort of right place, right time. But TikTok has the far better software. I mean, you talk to people who use both when it comes to Spotlight versus TikTok. TikTok's algorithm is insane. It learns so well. I mean, I'm a little ashamed to admit that every once in a while I get on there, and I'll tell you, my TikTok the feed that I get is completely different than someone else's. I mean, you get on there and 2 minutes later, it's customized to you because it sees how long you like stuff and how much you get into different things. So I think that TikTok they've got the software, they've got their niche, right? They're in that discovery, that short-term quick hitter, whereas Snapchat is a messaging platform that's trying to add that feature. They've got a ton of users, not as many as TikTok. They've got 530 million users. TikTok's got 730 million users. So if they do roll out something successfully, I think that they can turn on that switch. I mean, 530 million people using your app all the time is a huge resource. So if they can just figure out a way to get a little bit of money from them using advertising, then I think they can turn the corner on profitability. But when is that going to be, and how patient are investors going to be? Kevin, like you talked about, they were, what, $5 or $10 in March of 2020. Now they're up over 60. So if I was a long-term investor in Snapchat, I might be pretty content with my gains, maybe take some off the table here, because patience is not a virtue with investors, and they want to see results now.
Yeah, and Landon, I think you make a really good point. I think they all surprised us. I believe it was 3 quarters ago when they gapped up hugely on an earnings beat. That was sort of a surprise, I believe, to many investors, and I think it was us as well. But I'm curious because we sort of talk about this key demographic being Gen Z, which is ages 13 through 24, with Snapchat, and I think TikTok too. And I'm like 100. I don't have either of these apps, but I have to think that right now Snap also competes with Instagram because of Instagram Stories, which I think we're sort of taking a note from Snapchat. So how is Snapchat sort of faring compared to Facebook's Instagram, which is sort of the giant, because I believe Facebook still has the most global users compared to all of them?
Yeah, it does. In fact, if you look at the top 5 social apps, the social media apps, 4 out of 5 of those are owned by Facebook. Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, and Instagram. So they are dominating. The 5th, in case you're curious, is YouTube. So Snapchat's not on that list, and Facebook is absolutely dominating. And I think that it's Instagram, and they sort of copied TikTok as well with the different features. And so you saw on the happiness chart, they're doing better than Snapchat. They're up a lot higher, what I think is about 66, something like that. And Snapchat's much lower, down at 54. So everybody's kind of taken a piece of Snapchat. I think they had a good run, and now they're looking for what's the next thing. I like where they're going with this spotlight. They've got to execute it well in order to get people to switch over. The problem is, I think a lot of people think of Snapchat as a messaging app, and that's just how they use it. And if they want to go into that discovery of short-term content, then they go over to TikTok and they just switch. It's just a couple of clicks. So why would you want to stay in the same app if you've got no reason to? It's just a couple clicks to switch over. But I agree with Snapchat's move. I just don't know how easy it's going to be to execute.
And I think if you look at it, like my son uses only Snapchat and none of the other ones.
Yeah.
For messaging only. So it's definitely, the big winner. It's the big winner in that demographic for sure. All right, Landon, we'll take that into consideration as we look at Snap. That's Landon Swan. He's a co-founder of LikeFolio.com. Thanks for joining us.